I'd like to acknowledge and pay respect to the traditional owners of the land on which I'm coming to you. The land of the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, it's upon their ancestral lands from which One Space Love streams to you.
Welcome to Living Story on the One Space Love podcast. I'm your host, Stefania Papadopoulos. On this podcast, I sit down with inspiring guests who share their wisdom and their lived experience with the work that they're doing to help others let go of old stories, embrace who they truly are, and begin living a story where they feel aligned with purpose, with possibility. My hope is that each conversation reminds us to trust in your own unfolding, because your story is still being written. And welcome to Living Story.
I also used to see spirit. I used to have, friends, and I would have my imaginary friends. And in actual fact, it wasn't friends, it was spirit that I was connecting with. But back in the day, I grew up in the 70s. And so it wasn't sort of open to share. It wasn't known. It wasn't something that was embraced. It was pretty much kind of shut down. Stop telling fibs. You're lying. No, that didn't happen. Boom, 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 boom. And so I would be questioning, what's going on? Because I did feel these things. I used to be very sensitive, and I am still very sensitive. I'm an empath. So I would literally feel people's emotions from a young age, and I would know things, and I would sort of tug on mummy's coat and say, no, we shouldn't do this. Something's going to happen, and your mum would be like, don't be silly. Nothing's going to happen. Don't worry. And then of course we'll go along the day, we'll go along to an event or whatever, and something would happen. And so there was an unfolding which took place from a young age.
Welcome, Sophy Robertson, to Living Story on One Space Love podcast. So beautiful to have you today. Thank you for joining me.
Stefania, I'm really excited to share space with you and your listeners, and I can't wait to tap in and see what's going to come up today.
I'm going to share, we've had an interesting beginning, and I love just trusting how things flow, even with technical difficulties and connections and microphones joining. It's all perfect, isn't it? That's Living Story. I mean, let's just, it's...
Well, it represents life. Life isn't perfect. And, you have the best intentions of what you want, and then little hiccups come along, and technical issues, sound issues, playback issues, freezing screens, and all the rest. Welcome to, technology and cyberspace.
Yeah. I like to start off with my guests by asking, can you introduce yourself by answering the statement, I am?
So I am Sophy Robertson. I am a healer. I am a Reiki master teacher. I am a psychic medium. I am a meditation facilitator. I am an energy clearing specialist. I am a mentor. I am a wife. I am a mother. I am a pet owner. And I am a community member.
I love that. And just having met you and having had a chance to actually look deeper into your journey and your story, you are all of that and so much more. And it is, you definitely, to me, is someone that I really wanted to catch up with for this new series of Living Story, because I feel like a lot of your journey, you have stepped and trusted on each part of it. I wanted to start with, you share that you always had this knowing of connecting with spirit from a very young age. Do you want to take us back to when you first had that knowing?
So it's a great question, and I love this. Thank you. So it was when I was very, very young. I was talking to somebody just the other day, actually, Stefania, that I was doing a past life healing with. And they asked me, why did you get into past life healing? And I said, through my own experiences. So as a young, 3, 4, 5-year-old, I used to say to my mum, Mum, can we go off and go horse riding? I remember going horse riding and jumping, and Mum would look at me saying, Sophie, you've never been horse riding. And I'd say, yes, we used to do this. I used to live in France. I used to speak French.
Wow.
I used to do these things. Another time I used to say, when am I going to see that portrait that was painted? And Mum would say, what do you mean portrait? And I'd say, I remember sitting by a window for hours and hours and hours and getting bored because I was having my portrait painted. And Mum said, you've never had a portrait painted? ironically, my grandmother used to be a painter, and later in life, she did actually do my portrait. But these were all me remembering things that were very, very clear to me, very, very distinct. I also used to see spirit. I used to have, friends, and I would have my imaginary friends. And in actual fact, it wasn't friends, it was spirit that I was connecting with. Um, but back in the day, I grew up in the 70s. And so it wasn't sort of open to share. It wasn't known. It wasn't something that was
Yeah.
embraced. It was pretty much kind of shut down. Stop telling fibs. You're lying. No, that didn't happen. Bump, 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 bump. And so I would be questioning, well, what's going on? Because I did feel these things. Um, I used to be very sensitive, and I am still very sensitive. I'm an empath. So I would literally feel people's emotions from a young age, and I would know things. And I would sort of tug on mummy's coat and say, no, we shouldn't do this. Something's going to happen, and your mum would be like, don't be silly. Nothing's going to happen. Don't worry. And then, of course, we'd go along the day, we'll go along to an event or whatever, and something would happen. And so there was an unfolding which took place from a young age. And it got to the point where I actually did predict my own mother's passing at the age of 16.
Yeah.
And that was pretty tough because I actually was living in France then, funnily enough.
You were living in France at the moment. Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
so my family moved to France when I was 9 years old, and we grew up in the southwest of France in a little place called Condom, between Toulouse and Bordeaux, in a little village. And so I was about sort of 16, and I was sort of a 16-year-old discovering myself, my sexuality, my
Yeah.
all of the things that come up at that age. And but I was sort of tuning. I was very open. I was very connected, and I remember telling everybody, mum's going to pass, and she's going to pass this way, and this is what's going to happen. And everybody kept saying, Sophie, don't worry, that's not going to happen. You're making up stories. It's just fear, whatever, whatever. And of course it did happen. And I knew the day, I knew how, I knew all these events. Shortly after that, my boyfriend at the time's father then passed afterwards, and I also predicted his passing. And so
Yeah.
after a while, Stefania, it was quite weird because not knowing or understanding what was taking place, I actually thought, wow, I'm manifesting, I'm imagining this, I'm manifesting, and then it's happening. So I then just kind of did this big pushback, and like, no, I don't want this. I don't want to deal with this. I don't want to know about this. And I was also very grief stricken. And then I kind of did shut it down for quite a long time. I did push back, and
Yeah.
I just didn't understand. I didn't have anyone to talk to. I didn't have any training. I didn't know what was happening. I just thought it was all bad, and I was creating it. So it was quite fearful at the time.
Yeah, because in what you're sharing, was there anyone in all those years that you up to the 16-year-old yourself that was supporting those voices that were coming through? Because it sounds like, then you've gone through, I'm shutting this down. But was there anyone whispering that this could have been true to you, that these were coming through in those earlier years?
Not really. My brother, ironically, my brother used to call me, he's 4 years older than me. He used to call me,
Okay.
he used to call me a know-all. You're such a know-all. You know everything. You think you know everything. And in hindsight, I probably did.
Yeah.
I probably actually was sort of, saying, oh no, don't do that, or you shouldn't do that, or be careful about this, and things like that. Even I remember actually, because I did do a lot of horse riding in France, and I do remember thinking one day, somebody was sort of saying, come and try this new horse. We've got this new horse we want you to come and ride. And I remember saying, I just don't feel comfortable. I just, and mum was like, no, go horse riding. Go and, they want you to go off. And of course, I did actually have a really bad fall where this horse sort of took off and started galloping off down this roadway. And I went sort of flying and had quite a nasty fall. And I think even at that point, I knew something wasn't right. So I know. And so it was really, there were all these sort of things that were unfolding, and I just kind of didn't want to know any of it. So I literally, in my way, did kind of
Yeah.
close it off. Yeah, it was quite scary.
Yeah, and I'm feeling like, especially when things unfold that you've predicted and they're loved ones, and there's that grief that you're moving through. So take us now through those moments where you did shut it down. How was life for you? You moved into a different industry, And let's then show how you transition back out of that, back into your connection again.
Yeah, so I was always incredibly fascinated by photography,
Okay.
and I did actually end up getting quite an amazing job in London. I actually ended up working as a photographer's assistant for Terence Donovan, who was a very famous
Oh, wow.
60s photographer. So I worked with
Yeah.
him for a couple of years, and had a very incredible journey doing amazing haute couture fashion,
Mm,
celebrities, royal family. He photographed kind of. So it was quite I went from this sort of country France, rural
yeah.
to that. So I felt like I was in my dream job. And even on that dream job, there were events that were unfolding which were quite difficult for me. And again, things that I was sort of knowing. And so shortly after I'd sort of was working with him, I decided that I needed to kind of leave where I was living and I suppose run away essentially. I wanted to sort of escape out of what was going on for me back then. And so I found myself coming to Australia at the age of 21.
Mm,
I remember I had about
mm,
£5,000 saved, which, 35 years
that's a
ago was
lot.
was not bad for a 21-year-old. And
Yeah.
and so I landed in Melbourne and got into sort of
Okay.
carried on pursuing my photography and started in the film industry and working as a runner, starting at the bottom, working in commercials. Then I started doing drama series, and eventually I got into feature films. I got into
Oh,
reality
wow.
shows. So
Yeah.
for quite a long time, I sort of was able to immerse myself into that world, which for me,
Mm,
it was very comfortable because I could be creative. I was extremely sensitive and to some point I still am, but I was able to sort of explore myself and go with the flow and sort of fit into a quite a creative world. But during that time, there were little things that kept sort of reminding me of my calling. But again,
yes.
it took me a while to listen. I was like, no, I kept shutting things down. I kept like pushing back but there were little droplets of nuggets of, like the seeds, like somebody was dropping all these seeds in front of me and sort of pulling me back
Yeah.
into that way. And I remember when I was in Melbourne, because I lived in Melbourne when I first landed, and I found this place where I could study tarot cards, and I was right into tarot cards, right into meditation, right into crystals. I still got this beautiful crystal here. So I'm still very
Oh,
drawn to that.
beautiful.
And so
So that was still threaded in while you were in this industry, like you were still having these passions. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, it's funny, and my intuition would still be very spot on. I worked as a first assistant director, so I was sort of in charge of the set, in charge of the schedule, working closely with directors and producers, and so it was quite a high-paced, high-energy space. And I remember always sort of knowing outcomes of things, and people would say, "Oh, this is the budget, or this is the time," and I'd sort of say, "You're not going to be able to do it with that budget. You're not going to be able to do it with that time." And really, I was actually
Mm,
tuning in as it worked out. But anyway, so surely I sort of went on and slowly things started to open up again. I think I got to a point in my life with my relationship with Frankie, who's now my wife. I was quite
okay.
comfortable where I was in my life. And I just sort of decided, okay, I'm ready now to sort of connect. And this was 2011. And I think energetically, there was a lot happening around the world in
Yes.
2011 as well. There was a sort of an
Yeah.
opening which was starting, and I knew then. I thought, right, this film world is not for me anymore. I mean, it was for quite some
Hmm.
time afterwards, but I did sort of start to tap into my own. I set up my own business, creating sacred space, where I was doing energy clearings. I was going to people's homes. I was saging. I was clearing spaces energetically. And whilst doing that, I was able to sort of tap into my psyche again, and so I started doing readings. I started doing more training. I realized I needed some support. I needed some proper mentors and coaches and guides. So I was very fortunate again. It's like the universe sort of supporting me. And I was able to come across some really fascinating teachers that then took me under their wing and said, okay, yeah, let's work together. Let's explore. Let's, work with your gifts. Uh, uh, you know, for the first time, I kind of felt normal. I felt
Mm.
like what I was
Yeah.
experiencing.
Who was one of those mentors that
So
started to see you and pay attention to your gifts, like you're saying? Yeah.
yeah, so Janelle Campbell, who's quite a well-known psychic medium, I was able to I met her coincidentally. And I remember sitting next to her and sort of saying, oh, I think you're a medium, aren't you? And she said, yes, I am. And I said, do you teach? And she said, well, actually, I do. And I said, would you teach me? And she said, well, I'll have to think about it. And I said, well, have a good think about it because I'll be a good student, kind of thing. And and then she was, and we did, we did a lot of work together, in group work, in circle work, in one-on-ones. And she was great because she said, Sophie, go off and explore other teachers, go off and do other courses, go off and, gain as much knowledge that you can. But she recognized that there was something there to work with, so that then took me into uh, doing the work, and I was sort of balancing the two. I was balancing film work whilst doing my own readings, whilst doing my own healings. And then, of course, I was really fascinated by healing because I was, again, told by my guides, okay, you need to tap into healing. You need to go and heal people. And I'm like, but I'm not a healer. And they're like, yes, you are. I'm like, okay. So again, randomly, I came across who's my Reiki master teacher, Samantha Avery, uh, many years ago. I
Wow.
think it was 2016 when I discovered her. And it was quite fascinating actually, because I had I was working in the film industry, but I had a day off, and I was living in Balmain at the time. And I remember thinking, what am I going to do on my day off? And I thought, I'll drive to Manly. And then I thought, I don't know why I want to drive to Manly, but I drove to
I
Manly and
love this. Yeah.
walking down the Corso, which no longer exists at the moment. And, as I'm walking down the Corso, I see this crystal shop on the left-hand side. And I'm like, oh, crystals. It's like lollies to a kid's. It's like, and I go into this crystal shop, and I'm looking around and I'm thinking, I'm not really here for the crystals, but why am I here? And, on the corner of this table, there were these flyers of, learn how to become a healer and learn how to do Reiki. And I thought, well, that's what I need. And there was a flyer from Samantha Avery saying, she's teaching Reiki level 1 coming up in 2 weeks' time. So I jumped on, signed up, and the rest is history. And I thought, well, that's why I needed to go to Manly that day. But it was so weird.
Manly. Yeah.
It was such a weird
Yeah.
thing. Anyway, so then I went on to do Reiki level 1, level 2, Reiki level 3. I became a Reiki master teacher myself. So that sort of opened up that box. And it was like every corner I was turning, somebody would step in to support me in something else, another area, another skill base. And so I was gathering
Yes.
all of my tools. I was gathering all of my abilities, if you like, my skills, and offering those because it was, I knew from a very, very young age that I wanted to support people. Even as a 3-4-year-old, I used to say to mum, I just want to help people. I just want to look after people. So there's always that knowing to do that. And then I think what happened was, well, COVID happened, to be honest. I was, working, I just sort of finished film work. I finished a project, COVID happened. And then during COVID, I was sort of working off the Zoom, just doing sessions, remote sessions then. And afterwards I thought, well, no, I need to set up my own clinic and I need to, leave the film world behind. And that's exactly what I did. So I opened up the clinic here, Drummoyne Wellness Clinic, after COVID. And that's just, that was the end of my sort of cycle of film. And I don't regret it at all. It's just been incredible. So I've been here for almost 6 years now. And it's just been amazing. And
Okay.
it's just gone from one thing to another. So I run workshops, I run courses, I teach psychic development, I teach tarot. I'm a Reiki master teacher. So I, hold space for a lot of different people. I've become a mentor now. A lot of people want to come to me for services, for business services, for mediumship, for psychic development. It's sort of, it's unfolded. And I think I wasn't ready before to do this. And so it's all about timing, isn't it?
Exactly where I was being guided to go is what I love about what you're sharing is it is all about trusting in and also listening to the whispers, like you said, going to Manly, and then that led you to now training your own students in Reiki. And I feel like your story is a beautiful example that you're constantly living it and that you're trusting the path. I have been to Drummoyne Wellness Clinic, and I got to work with one of the students that you've trained. I can't remember, I don't know what level she was in, but what a beautiful clinic it is. And I really recommend if you're based in Sydney to go and make an appointment to look at the website. There's so many offerings there. But yeah, it was a very powerful powerful Reiki session, and highly recommend it. So
Oh, well,
I
Stefania,
just wanted to share that.
yeah, that's
Yeah.
lovely. And what I love about the space here is it is a community space. People
Yes.
feel very, very comfortable. When they walk in the door and instantly they say, it feels really lovely here. I feel really safe. I can really
Mm.
be myself. And I do consider it a community center. I do consider it, yes, it's a wellness space, but it's more than that. It's a space for people to come and explore and tap into their own natural gifts and to feel safe and do so with like-minded souls. So I feel very, very lucky that I do have this space to work in.
I just caught up with a beautiful guest, Brad, who has been through an extraordinary journey of a diagnosis. And he shared that coming through that, he realized that his purpose is to be a healer. So I wanted to ask you on that, what do you feel about us all coming here and having a purpose?
Look, I am 100% believe in that. I'm a big believer in past lives, reincarnation, and we come into this timeline with a predestined journey. We have free will though, Stefania. So what happens is we come in and we make decisions that we feel are relevant at the time. And so sometimes we get sidetracked, but eventually you'll end up getting to your endpoint. It just depends on the decisions you make as to how quickly you get there. You know, for myself, for example, when I was very, very young, I knew that I was different from other kids, even from the age of 3. I mentioned that before. I knew I had an awareness. I was seeing spirit. I was seeing things. And I knew that I had a journey that was one of helping people, taking care of people and nurturing, i.e. healing. But it took me a long time to actually reach that endpoint. I had to navigate things that got in the way, life decisions, family passings, moving countries, moving from England to France, moving from France back to London, moving from London to Australia, all before I was 21. So there was a lot of things that I had to sort of navigate and work out how to get around that. But 100% I believe that we are here for a reason, a cause, and in actual fact, at the moment, a lot of people are awakening to that realization. There's a big shift in consciousness and in the collective as to why are we here. This morning I had a client saying, she's in her 60s, I know there's a bigger purpose. I know there's more for us. I've just got to work that out. And I said, well, you've still got time to work it out. Doesn't matter what your actual age is. So we do have a purpose. And sometimes it's through life difficulties and life challenges that creates that gap, that wound. When we have the wounds, we heal through our wounds. And it's in that moment that we realize, okay, well, this is what this is why I'm here. This is what I'm called to do. This is where I'm getting pulled to. Unfortunately, what happens with a lot of people is they have this yearning, desire to do something, but then they shut it down. They shut it down through fear. They shut it down because they don't trust themselves. They shut it down because of what other people tell them they should be doing. So we have to navigate constantly other belief systems and other structures before we can, get to where we're going. But I always say, trust yourself, trust your intuition, because that's your best gift.
And I think listening to your story, even having been through the film industry and photography, were there parts and threads that you can feel that you feel have helped you in now for living your purpose now? Like, do you think that that there are pieces from that have helped you in your tool bag of what you're doing now?
Look, that's an interesting point. I do consider my work to be creative. I suppose there's that sense of creativity and being able to sort of not just see, I'm not narrow minded. I'm very much the bigger picture person, and I can see things from a very different perspective and a higher perspective. And I think you sort of probably have to have elements of that to survive the film industry. Certainly you have to have
Yeah.
broad shoulders. You have to, be able to show up and be knocked down. And there's elements of that. And I think, because let me say, this has not been an easy journey. It might sound the way I'm describing it. It's not been an easy journey to get from where I was to here.
Yes.
There has been a lot of judgment. There is still a lot of judgment, and there is criticism, and there is, people kind of questioning what I'm doing, and so you do have to sort of not listen to that. You do have to stick to your pathway. I have to trust that what I'm doing is authentic and I'm supporting people and it's for the highest good of all, because certainly it hasn't been easy. It hasn't been easy. Even from my
Yeah.
own family and friends that question why would you want to leave the film industry where you've got a good reputation, you're paid well, it's a job, you know,
Yes.
comfort, it's security, all those sort of things into something that you have no idea about?
Yeah,
And I said,
absolutely.
well, I love what I have no
Mm.
idea about, and I know that that's where I'm supposed to be, and I'm trusting it.
Yeah.
You know, my wife, Frankie, she said to me when I opened up the space, well, what's your plan? What's your budget? What's your forecast? And I'm like, what are you talking about? She said, well, I want to see a spreadsheet. Where's the figures? Where's the numbers? And I said, darling, there is none. She said, what do you
Yeah.
mean? I said, you have to trust that what I know what I'm doing is right. I know that it's going to be okay.
Mm.
And so we were quite kind of different in our views about how to set up business back then, but I did have to trust myself.
What
I
is
had to trust myself.
Absolutely. And what is her industry, Sophie? Is she in the creative industry?
So Frankie works for the Red Cross Blood Service, and so it's a very, very
Okay.
different area to mine. You know, Frankie says she's saving lives, and I might say I'm saving lives in different ways.
I was going to
You know,
say, I was going to actually step in and say, I feel like there's a similar mission there of wanting to help people and save lives. So, yeah.
that's right. So similar, but different. But she's very
Yes.
much the logical, practical,
Mm.
forecaster. But I'm practical and logical, but I forecast things differently. We just have a different way of
Yes.
approaching.
Yeah, absolutely. And she supports your intuition. And if you say, don't get on that aeroplane, she's trusting that, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah, yeah.
I don't sort of bring my work home, and I don't sort of tell her what to do by any means. But every now and then, Frankie will say, "What's your gut feeling, or what's your thoughts on
Mm,
this outcome, or what's?" And so when she asks, I give it to her. But otherwise, I don't.
mm.
Otherwise, there'll be an argument.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I think that's important when, I mean, my best friend is intuitive and it's, I mean, that's her business, but it's like you don't want to keep asking them because it is more when you need to ask a question, you ask a question. But it is, I think, having that respect because otherwise you'd be doing it, you'd be tuned in all the time. Is that right? Like it just, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll give you an example of this. I never
Yeah.
ever feel that it is my right to share anything with anyone. If they come to me, if they ask for help, then I'm very happy to support, people with
Mm,
things. But it was funny because, as a medium, you connect to the spirit world, and it's a beautiful gift, and I feel very honored to be of service, to support the community, to pass on messages because it's deeply, deeply healing to hear a message from a loved one or family member or a friend who's passed.
yeah, absolutely.
And so it was many, many years ago, I used to do the Mossman markets. I used to do candles, essential oils, crystals.
And you've
And
got
so,
your sprays, and I remember seeing them in your clinic. They're beautiful. Yeah.
thank you. And so I remember once being at the markets, and I was a Saturday morning, early morning. I'm still setting up. I'm still doing my thing. And all of a sudden I feel my energy changes, and I feel this lady in the spirit world come and stand next to me. And as she stands next to me, there's a lady kind of walking past my stall, and this lady taps me on
Yeah.
the shoulder. She said, "That's my daughter. You need to talk to her." And she was quite bossy and quite direct. And in that split moment, I'm like, "Oh gosh, what do I do here? This woman's going to think I'm crazy." And this
Yes.
other's tapping me on the shoulder, saying, "Boom, boom, boom." And I sort of went, "Excuse me." This lady turned around. She said, "Yes." And I said, "I don't know how to tell you this, but I do have your mother here in the
Mm,
spirit world, and she has a message for you." And in
mm.
that moment, this beautiful woman turned around and just looked at me, and sort of almost, burst into tears because her mother had passed
Mm.
a week or so before. And so there was a deeply,
So quite new. Yeah.
yeah, quite new. But so there was some messages to pass on to her, and subsequently we became friends. And she was the most non-believer of this prior to that experience, and so it was deeply
Mm.
healing for her, and we did become friends after that. So sometimes it's outside of my control to get someone's attention, and that's happened a couple of different times as well. But I do sort of keep it to myself, and unless something extreme like that happens.
Mm. I love that. I mean, you keep bringing up what I wanted to, before we ended the chat, mention that you also do have that ability to talk to spirit. And having your mother pass, we started off with sharing that story. Do you find that it helps having that connection? Do you want to share a little bit about that, like having that gift to be able to share with the other, to feel spirit come in and the messages come through?
Yeah, so it is deeply, deeply healing. And it's, I was talking to a client just the other day about this. They were asking me what happens. How do you know you've got someone in the spirit world? What physically happens to the body? And so it's like we have our auras around us. We have our energy center, energy field. And when spirit comes in, that they sort of blend with our energy. So it would be like you're in a room and suddenly you feel hot, or you suddenly feel
Okay.
your energy changes. And that's what happens. My energy shifts and I become aware that there's somebody coming close to me. And sometimes they become so close that they come into my body. Sometimes they can actually come through, and it almost feels like it's trance medium, where somebody steps into my physical space and takes on my body as a form. That can happen as well, but they can come very, very close. And so my physical body changes. I might hear them speaking. I might literally see them or smell them or feel their energy, or they show me things. And so they use all of our six senses, Stefania. They use all of our abilities to blend with us. And so it's not just a person standing there having a conversation. It's not like that. They connect with all of our senses, and it's deeply, deeply a beautiful experience. And I always have to ask my clients, before they come for reading, is that what you want? I don't want to assume that just because somebody comes in,
Okay.
they want to hear a message. Because sometimes people say, well, I don't want to talk to my father. He was an asshole. Sometimes it's cool. So I always ask permission beforehand. If I feel someone in the spirit world, would you like me to share and bring them in for you? Because sometimes not everyone wants to hear that. You don't know people's story. But it's interesting. I also got asked the other day, are they still angry? Are they still in pain? Are they still suffering? And no, there's no,
Yeah.
the physical body as we know it, this passes, but our soul, our consciousness rises. And that's essentially who we are. We are conscious beings. And so that rises, and there's no fear, anger, pain. That's very much a physical, three-dimensional way. And when we transcend, when we shift, that all goes. So when spirit comes in, they're not to point the finger or to tell you off or to, it's not like that at all. They're there
To resolve that anger or something. Yeah. Yeah.
So, that's something
Yeah.
that you have to do yourself in this world. That's something you have to
Right.
work through. Because at the end of the day, as you know, one love space, that all there is love. And that's the
One
purest
space love. Yeah.
one space love.
Yeah. No, but I like One Love Space, but yeah, One Space Love. To me, that name came to me quite a long time ago now. And it was that I just intuitively knew that all there is love. Like love is the energy. Yeah.
And that's the thing.
Yeah.
And that's how spirit comes in. They come in with love. They come in to support. They come in to help us.
Okay.
It's whether we're open or not to receive that, to feel them. Everybody has the ability to tune in. Everyone has the ability to connect, to feel, but we just become very closed in our minds, our thoughts,
Yes.
our energy, our belief. We shut it down. But if you allow it to open up, it's like a muscle going to the gym. If you go to the gym and train muscle, you're going to get stronger. And
I
it's
like
the same
that analogy. Yeah.
with your psychic ability. Everybody's psychic. Not everyone is a medium, but you can open that up if you want to go into that. It's just like a muscle that you train. But we're all born with a psychic ability. That's our natural way of being. That's that gut feeling that you get, whether you leave the house and you decide, am I going to go down that road or am I going to go down that road? And you decide at the last minute, I'm going to go down the back end road. And then you realize that on the main freeway, there was maybe an accident that you would have been delayed getting to work or something like that. Like the last minute,
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
intuition kicks in and you decide to change your pathway. That's just your natural knowing that kicks in, and we all have it. If people say, oh, I'm not psychic or I'm not intuitive, and I say, yes, you are. Yes, you are. Let's go and find it. Let's just go and wake it up and see where it's hiding. And the hiding is just the belief in self.
Because I see a lot of those that I love who have incredible gifts, and yet the mind is, and it is that conditioning, isn't it? Because I often see like, oh, I'm going to do that later. I've got to get, you know, A, B, C done because of the safety, and then I'll do that.
Correct.
You want
Yeah.
to, yeah.
And so it's all about, people often ask me, when should I do this? When's the right time? And I say, well, you have
Yeah.
to find that within yourself. But it's not like, you haven't missed out. If it hasn't happened yet, don't worry. It's about to happen. You've got to give yourself some leeway, we're so hard on ourselves, aren't we? As
Yeah.
women, as as healers, as community members, as family, sisters, whatever. We're very, very hard on ourselves, and I think we just got to be kinder to ourselves. We've got to speak kinder to ourselves. I spend a lot of time at the clinic reminding people to be kind to yourself. Give yourself a break. Say how much you're valued, you're worthy, and to remind you that you are loved and you are important and you are worthy and you are deserving, and it's your right to do what you want for yourself. Yes, you may have a job that doesn't allow, you might have family, kids, yes, we've got all of those things, but that's no reason for you not to be your true self. And so I love to empower people to navigate them to reach that. And I think, I said to a client the other day, we're all angels here. We're all angels in
Oh, I
this
love that.
timeline to assist one another. And when we come to realize that, then that's when the magic happens. That's when the healing happens.
Mm. Because there's a few things in what you beautifully shared there. And I think a lot of it does come trusting in the timing and trusting in the journey. So even when you shared then, like, trust yourself when it feels right. And sometimes, if things aren't lining up and you feel like you're pushing, it may be time to rest and pause. So I loved how you shared that. Yeah.
And I always say there are signs, there are signs and there are times for things to unfold. And, when you see the sign twice, or when you keep hitting the wall and, you keep getting the same response, then it's time to move on. There's something better,
Mm.
rather than when people get upset about the fact that they may become redundant. There's a lot of that at the moment, redundancy. And where does that leave me? And am I the failure? Why am I being asked to leave? And I always say, this is a
Mm.
gift. You've just been given a gift. You've just been given a
Yeah.
free card to go off and do something better for yourself. Something that perhaps
Yes.
aligns you to your truth, an opportunity to do something completely different that you haven't thought about. So I always say, look at these things as opportunities. If a house falls through that you really wanted, it just means it's a better one around the corner. If a
Yes.
relationship falls through and that you were so attached to, let go of the attachment. What is it that you really want? Perhaps it really wasn't working for you, and so when we ask those questions and we dig deep, we realize actually we're just pretending. We're just pretending
Mm.
we like that job. We're just perhaps pretending we love this relationship, or, there's a lot of that we mask. We have to change. We can't stay the same. Everything's changing. It's constant change. You
Yeah.
either flow with that or you restrict it, you bounce against it. And then that's when things don't align. So, but sometimes it's hard to navigate that and it's hard to see it. It's easier for
Mm.
outsiders to look in and say, well, this is what potentially you could do. And this is what I can see for you. And this is what some, opportunities coming up. Because it's very hard when you're in it, isn't it? To see out sometimes.
Oh, absolutely. And I'm giggling as I'm going to share this, but I had to walk away and just do a walk because the mind was ruminating yesterday. And I did ask for a sign, and there were, those flashing billboards that change.
Oh,
And
yeah.
then it changed and it said, "Holy ding dong." And it was a hot dog food ad, or I've never seen it before, but it said "Holy ding dong." And I was, my thoughts were me being a ding dong, really. Like, and so it was a funny, I thought it was I like those cosmic signs. Like,
Oh, I love it.
uh,
As you were laughing, it's just, spirit are always reminding us to have more
yeah.
fun in life and
Yes.
just to
Yeah.
see the humor in things. We're so
Yeah.
serious and we get so bogged
Yeah.
down in the small detail. It's like, doesn't matter. It all really doesn't matter. Just have more fun with
Yeah.
whatever you're doing. It's very important. Love that.
I love that too, because I think, we get we're mothers, we're caregivers, you know, all these different roles or work full time in executive positions, we can get quite serious. What is something we could do at the end of our day before we lay our head down on that pillow? I don't know, it just came to me, something that you could share.
Yeah. So, I mean, I always say, just I'm always spending a lot of time in gratitude. I give thanks to my day,
Mm.
to my clients, to my family, my relationship, my animals. I really do
Mm.
spend a lot of time in gratitude. And I just say, today I did my best. I did my very best. And I think when you
Yeah.
do that, it just let go of any noise that we might be ruminating in our head, any sort of, thoughts of, oh, could I have done more? Should I have done more? Did I say the right thing? Could I have, you could drive yourself mad, and a lot of people do. So I always say, I did my very best today. And,
Yeah.
and every day I wake up
Yeah.
and I set myself up for success. I mentioned before, I
Mm.
come into the clinic and I bring in my guides, I bring in my team, I clear my energy field, I open up my aura, my energy for my clients. And I just say today, allow me to be my best version to support others, allow me to support. And so, and in doing my very best. And that way
Yeah.
you're just allowing that sometimes things aren't always easy and sometimes it isn't always flowing, but you know that you're there to support and that's what you're doing, which is your very best. So
I love that. Thank you, Sophie. And before we finish up, can you share what is exciting you at the moment and what have you got coming up that we can let the listeners know?
I know. So we do have some things coming up. We've got a fantastic event coming up called Women Rising with
Mm.
Caroline. We're co-hosting this coming Friday, the 11th of July, and it's a 4-hour event to
Mm.
empower you, to allow you to tap into your soul's purpose, your soul's truth. And so we do some skills and we do some exercises, some techniques to really allow you to find yourself and to empower you. So that's open to anyone that wants to jump on the website and book through my website, sophierobertson.com.au. And also I've got my online course, which is starting. It's called Soul Awaken, and it's allowing you to really harness your intuition, find your truth, open up your energy field. We do activations, we do meditations, grounding, all the things that allow you to become more present in your everyday and to really empower you to
Mm.
be, what you want to be. So that's available coming up as well, starting soon. So
Oh,
yes, very
beautiful.
excited.
And just directing people to your website. Do you want to mention the website so they can, because there's also, they can make appointments to come and have Reiki, and there's
Yes.
many appointments available actually at the clinic. Yeah.
So we do
Yeah.
we run lots of workshops. I teach Reiki, I teach psychic development, tarot cards, crystals. We have lots of workshops that we run here. So my website is Sophy Robertson. That's SOPHYROBERTSON.com.au. And it's all there.
Oh, beautiful, beautiful. Thank you so much, Sophie Robertson, for joining me on Living Story on One Space Love. It has been such a beautiful conversation. Thank you.
Stefania, I feel really blessed and honored to share my story with you in your beautiful space. It's such a pleasure and I'm very, very grateful. So thank you to you too.
Thank you.